Today, we are going to talk about a very challenging issue in the cannabis industry, and that is getting good people to work for you. And it's a different kind of demographic. There's different challenges with cannabis being federally illegal, but legal in a state. And there's a lot of issues with that. But today, we want to talk to a couple of operators, and instead of focusing on the legal issues, what are the practical issues from the perspective of someone who is operating in the space and trying to get good employees. So we've got Brett Emmert and Mark Collins, and they've got operations in several states all across the supply chain, and they're also consultants with Southern High Points. And then we've got Erica Vallejo, who is an amazing web designer and marketer who knows all the ins and outs of the prohibitions of marketing cannabis online, especially on Google platforms. So thank you, everybody, for coming to inform our listeners, probably primarily lawyers, about, what it feels like, from your point of view. So, guys, what are the biggest challenges with hiring that you see?
Go ahead, Mark.
I think like the biggest challenge we're seeing right now is just a reduced labor force. So you're not having as many applicants come through and you're trying to choose which ones to work for you. Personally, we have a model of hiring people that don't have experience per se in the cannabis industry, but have some type of skill set that leans towards working in this industry. We always say we love old Walmart employees. They make great employees for our business. But just over the past year, we've seen this labor market contract and there's not as many people out there searching for jobs. So you're just trying to adapt and find people that'll come work for you that also meet your needs. And that's our biggest challenge right now, outside of the pay people are expecting nowadays, just because of the inflation that's going on. I'll let Brett add anything he may have to that.
The next thing is just getting people to respond to the interviews that they've accepted. You have about a 50% acceptance rate of someone that says, yes, I'll be there for an interview, and actually show up. Don't really have any idea why that's an issue, but it is. It seems like it's getting slightly better, but just getting people in the door to talk to them. And when they do come in, they don't know how to properly interview. They don't come with their appropriate apparel. They don't have resumes with them. They're just disconnected from what we consider the norm of going into an interview. It doesn't matter if it's a low wage or a high wage, there's certain expectations there, and they don't bring that with them, which doesn't necessarily mean they're not a good employee or a good candidate. It's just something that we've noticed over time that has changed from just 4 years ago.
I think that's the key, is it's changing, right? I know, like my age group, we were taught to bring resumes and go to business and turn that resume in and then try to apply. That's no longer the way people apply for jobs or even do things. So it's just having to adapt to what people are doing today versus this knowledge that built over a lifetime. You just got to be willing to adapt, especially with your younger generation and how they're coming into the workforce and approaching it, I guess.
I was going to say, it's remarkable to me how somebody could just not show up, that this younger generation, the ghosting. I mean, just be an adult and write back and say, sorry, I can't make it. Sorry, I changed my mind. I don't know why they lack basic politeness in addition to work ethic. But on that point you mentioned, Mark, about people not showing up for interviews, I had a big company in Houston tell me that, especially around the pandemic and after the pandemic, when so many people were collecting unemployment, that to continue receiving their unemployment, they have to turn in, oh, well, I sought this many job interviews or whatever. And they don't actually have to show up to them. They just have to tell the Workforce Commission that I set up these interviews. And that seemed to be a real hard problem. What do you see from your perspective on, online and the different channels that you traverse, Erica?
Yeah, that's what I was going to talk about as well, because I've noticed that maybe it's just because during that time frame, people mostly did Zoom interviews, and so it's like trying to I don't know, re-socialize themselves or like regain some of those skills, because they have been on Zoom and Google Meet or whatever, and so they maybe forgot to put it in their calendar, or they didn't. There's just the lack of organization, I think. And I think the pandemic and some of that has caused some of that. But I think also not only to speak about labor shortage as well, but I think it's also because people aren't looking for traditional jobs anymore. They're looking to be more in the gig economy, right? Because there's like this whole new channel of doing business these days, and so they are more looking for maybe freelance work as opposed to looking to go into somewhere. Maybe they're looking to do stuff just remote, right? Because it's much easier to do that and look for those types of jobs, because some of those jobs do pay, pretty handsomely, especially if you have a lot of different roles lined up, right? So you could say maybe you have skills in marketing, or you do have some type of web design or social media skills, even if it's light. And to be honest, there's a lot of people that lie about those things too. So it's about sifting through and really kind of getting an understanding of who really has the skills and actually putting them to the test and really determining, like, do they actually possess the skills? So it's just a very interesting market right now, because there is that transition from like a traditional 9 to 5 to also being kind of more in the freelancer consultant type of roles, because people, maybe they were looking for jobs and then they hit a lot of roadblocks because of the pandemic, and maybe there's just all sorts of reasons, right? And then feeling like they don't have experience in cannabis, which a lot of people don't, because it's a new market, right? It's an emerging market. So I think there's also that challenge, right? They feel like maybe they aren't qualified to apply. So maybe they don't apply, or if they do apply, maybe they get cold feet or stuff, stuff like that. And so a lot of the people that I speak to maybe come from like a gig freelance type of role. They have a trepidation because they don't have a ton of experience. But I always look for the base foundational skills to speak to whether they are able to perform, because cannabis, right, like it's a huge monster of knowledge to obtain. And I think that's something, I mean, I've developed over 20 years, right? So it's something that I think can be developed over time, but having those foundational skills that can transfer over into the industry is more what I look for when I'm trying to hire on people to fill into organizations that need the help, more so than the actual experience in cannabis. But I think it's just kind of connecting those dots for people and helping them understand, right? And kind of making sure the jobs descriptions kind of make that clear. I think that's important to finding the talent that you're looking for, and to get them to show up, right? To understand what your culture is, because that's what people are looking for, right? Not just a job. They're also looking for like a culture fit. And they're also, so, because they could just continue to accept unemployment, or continue to have freelance roles and make ends meet. But if they can find like a home, so to speak, that will not just fit their culture and what they're looking for as far as skills, but also a mission, right? A passion from the company on what they're trying to accomplish. And if they feel like they fit into that, and they feel appreciated, respected, and that their skill level matches the role, they're going to stay, and they're going to be loyal for a lot longer. So I think those are things to.
You just hit on something that I was ready to jump in and say, contradicting you though, is that this younger generation has a complete lack of loyalty that, older generations had. You'd at least stick it out for a little while, even if it was bad.
Well,
And so
we grew
well,
up.
I want to finish though. The largest operator in Colorado told me, now he has a real comprehensive program for his employees. He sends them through a university so they become really educated. He gives them benefits, including retirement, and he elevates them and promotes them and gives them a chance. And I remember talking to one of his dispensary managers, and she said, you know what? 6 months ago, I was working at the mall, and that's all I was ever going to do. Now I have a career. All right, so he put all this into it, and that's how he's hoping that workers will respond. But yet, even though he pays more than the other marijuana dispensaries around him, most of employees just leave and flit to some other place, despite all that he has tried to put into this package to make it a traditional, appealing long-term home for you. And they don't care. He said they will move over to the store next door for 2 cents more in pay. And they don't care about all of the benefits that I offer.
Yeah, I think
That's
what you're saying there, Lisa, is exactly what we're seeing, right? It's almost like today's culture, ghosting it's a legitimate way to do anything. So if I don't want to see you or talk to you, I'm just gonna leave and go do something different and never say anything. Where you come up, our generation came up where you give notice when you leave an employer, you stay as long as you can because you don't want to burn bridges and you don't want to have these gaps on your resume. But unfortunately, today everybody's hiring and everybody knows that they can quit today and start tomorrow somewhere else. So it's not hard for people to find work and they're not worried about burning bridges. And you just have to know that when you're dealing with employees. Just one of my own biases was trying to create this perfect utopia at work and everybody's going to be happy and stay and work. But reality is it's not happening. So you have to act appropriately, which is just understand that turnover is going to come. And how do you just make sure that the business continues and keeps going on?
That
Brett,
leads to my next question. Given all of these things, how do you interview to try to, suss out who's going to be like that and who's going to actually be a good worker for you?
I don't think it's possible to do that. It's more like interview to see if they have the skill set to do the job and then know that they're probably going to leave 6 months to a year out and just always keep that on the forefront of your mind.
I like to try to interview for employees that are a good fit for the team. They may not have the skills and that's totally fine. And or they may have some skills and that's fine too. And we let them know up front that you're going to have to relearn the way that we do things here. And they either accept that or they don't. But if they're a good fit for the team and the group as a whole is cohesive and gets along, they tend to stick around a little bit longer because they enjoy coming to work. They enjoy the people they work with. It's not the work environment, it's not what they're doing, it's the group of people they're with that they want to come back to every day. But as I've told Mark now, I tend to overhire for my side of the business because inevitably somebody's going to leave. If I get 6 months out of somebody, we're doing all right. And that's 3 years ago, 4 years ago, that wasn't what we used to say. We used to get several years out of people. And occasionally you do. We have a couple tenured employees that are tapping on 3 years, but that's rare. It's not everybody. We have far more that last 6 months and then move on to something else for 2 cents over here,
And then you got to spend more money and time and energy training and retraining, and that must impact your bottom line a little bit.
Oh, absolutely.
A little bit. So mechanization is really the answer. It's unfortunate, but that's just the direction. Whenever we have the possibility to do, we have to go.
Well, so what qualifications should you be looking for?
Reliability is the biggest one. Somebody who's just going to show up every day. Outside of that, just do they have a strong work ethic? Have they done anything that's laborious? Because you're sweating all day long, you're lifting things, you're crawling around on your hands and knees in the dirt sometimes. It's just the nature of agriculture. And so if they know what hard work is, they've done construction, they've worked in any sort of agriculture before, then they're really strong candidates because they're not afraid to get their hands dirty and or sweat. If it's someone who comes from, let's say, as a bookkeeper and has never done any of that, we've had one or two work out like that, but most of the time they're like, oh, this is way harder than I thought it was. So it looks good on the surface. It looks like fun for a couple days. And then you're like, oh, I am wore out at the end of the week. This is not fun anymore. It's like, yeah.
On my side of the business, it's looking for people that have to do repetitive stuff every single day and don't really get to take a different day. Basically, Brett's side of the business, some days they're doing different types of things just depending on the needs of the plants. Where mine, they're always making joints or always putting flour in jars. It never changes. I think retail employees are the best employees. So if you come from a retail aspect, you're already used to just stocking shelves and taking care of customers. It's the same thing pretty much every day. It makes a good fit on my side. I don't need cannabis experience or anything, that can be trained on how to do it. It's weighing and putting packaging together. So the more you're used to that, just tedious every day doing something, the better you're going to fit on my team.
Yeah, going back to that Colorado operator, kind of like you said, you got to find that work ethic, somebody who has actually done real work with their hands in the past.
Mhm.
And what he said was, a lot of people are attracted to this industry and want a job at a marijuana company because it sounds cool. They like weed. And then they find themselves, trimming bud all day long. And it's hot and humid in there. And they're like, oh, this isn't what I thought. This is real work. And, and they can't take it and they leave. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
We started getting honest up front with that, like from the get-go. You can't get high at work. It's not going to be just a stoner position, basically. It's work. Like, you're going to work. I think for the most part, we don't run into that anymore. Initially, that was a huge deal you'd run into, with people thinking that they were going to come and just get high and do nothing all day, but get high. We make it clear nowadays.
an input, Erica?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm coming from more of the remote type of like desk jobs, perspective, because that's, having a physical labor job and being remote working on the computer, those are two different kind of worlds, right? And so I find it very interesting how what y'all are experienced compared to what I experience as well. So, but I think there's some crossover as far as not necessarily needing the experience in cannabis, but also just looking at that work ethic. I think that's really important, and just personality, right? Because I want somebody that's going to show me that they are willing to work and that they are going to be okay when we hold them accountable for what needs to be done, and understanding that, yeah, like, we don't care if you smoke weed on your off time, but like, also we have a job to do, and that's really critical. And so making that very clear is very important. Like Mark said, like, understanding that it's not just getting high all day and then like maybe doing some work. It's like doing the work and then get high later, right? Like, if you want to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, then how often should you be hiring? It sounds like from what I've heard so far, you're on a constant rolling basis of hiring.
Mhm.
Anymore, that is the truth. About the time you get the head count you need to be thinking about hiring someone additionally, because it's just a matter of time before someone leaves.
An understudy, you've always got to be looking for one.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
Now, I'm curious, guys, do you maybe work with like a recruiting firm or anything like that to help source some of these candidates, or how are you guys actually doing that? Are you sourcing your own, or?
For the most part, we use online platform like Indeed to do our job postings, but occasionally it'll be like word of mouth. Somebody knows somebody and just sends a resume to us, and then they'll get an interview.
Okay.
Well, what should you do if you're having issues getting good candidates?
You just keep interviewing. Sometimes you just got to keep rolling and interviewing until you get someone that's a good fit for the team, because that's really the number one thing, good fit for the team. And so that's what we do. It seems like about once a month we have at least 2 or 3 interviews set up that we do, and it seems to be enough. We keep enough of a head count, and like I said, things are improving slightly. They're not a huge change, but you can notice a slight uptick in the quality of applicants and the number who actually show up for the interviews.
Yeah. And I think being proactive, making sure you're out there searching. And then, like Erica was saying earlier, make sure that your job post is like for the person that you're looking for. It's not just something that's generic on there. You want to tell the people what you're looking for, and occasionally updating that and refreshing it, and trying to get more eyes on it and people to come in and do interview. But realistically, it's just being proactive and staying on top of it.
I do have to add, don't use Ninja or Rockstar. Aren't either of those.
No, I haven't heard of those.
That's a big thing. I kind of poke at it a lot, because people tend to use those words a lot, especially in marketing for some reason. Like, nobody's a ninja or a rock star most of the times.
What if
So-
you're a ninja rock star?
What if you, yeah, I mean, there's some of that.
There's something called Vankst, which is supposed to have cannabis positions. I've seen that.
Well, I
don't
think
know how that
Erica's saying
works.
though, don't use those words in your posting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Have you used Bankst as a platform at all to source candidates? So I know that, like Lisa mentioned, that's a big one.
ZipRecruiter is one that I've kind of looked at a little bit. I haven't done a lot of searching for other online platforms just because Indeed is the #1 go-to. There's even, as silly as it sounds, you can use Craigslist as well. It's
Does
just,
Craigslist still exist?
Yeah, I'm a huge Craigslist
It
I have been for 18 years. I even got my house on Craigslist, my car, everything.
man.
I
Yeah.
think you can find a date on there too.
Well,
I'm just
I
kidding.
don't look on the
Add more.
convictions part,
I'm just kidding.
but I do a lot of retail business on there. Or like, when my kids were babies, I would buy baby equipment from somebody because you only use something for like a month, right? And then I would sell it for more than what I paid for.
Yeah, these days
My
I've
little mommy side hustle
used-
on Craigslist.
I see a lot of stuff on Facebook groups too, when people are looking for positions as well, whether they're looking for positions or there's also people that are posting some of their needs as well on different groups, on different business groups. Have y'all ever experienced that or seen anything like that?
LinkedIn.
Yeah, like, well, LinkedIn, but we've used Facebook in the past to do things. It's not a preferred method because what ended up happening was you started having like people coming in and trolling the conversation. And it distracted from what you're trying to do. So it was like, this isn't a good platform, just to give a practical example. When we had first started business, we had put up a Facebook post and said, hey, we're looking to hire. And we did it in an industry group, right? For Washington cannabis companies. And then you had people that weren't even in the industry coming in saying, well, the pay is horrible. How do you treat people this way? And that derailed the posting, and it became about that, not about the job itself. And it's like, that, nah, it didn't actually help. It created more problems in the long run. We're like using Indeed, ZipRecruiter, stuff like that. Nobody's going to come troll you.
And
Right.
we have our website set up so you can apply online. And that has actually started to bring in some traffic as well.
Oh, that's great. How about LinkedIn? Your experience on LinkedIn? I see a lot of open positions and requests for talent through there. How's that worked out?
I'm good. So I follow LinkedIn pretty closely. Not sure that Mark does, but I do. And I follow different cannabis groups on there, and there's a lot of discussions about, hey, I'm looking for work, or do you know anybody that's hiring? And so there's an avenue there. You don't even necessarily have to put a posting out. Somebody usually comes out and says, hey, I'm looking for work in this area. But you could put a posting out, and it gets pretty decent traffic. It obviously, LinkedIn's really designed for typically higher end jobs. At least that was my impression of it early on. But now you're starting to see kind of a whole range of applications on there, and people chiming in saying, yeah, I have this experience. Do you think it's applicable?
I didn't know. I was surprised to hear that Indeed is #1 in cannabis too.
I think it's across the nation of just all job searches. So yeah, it's just people are just, they hear that, they know the advertisements, so they go to it. And I follow all the postings here in the Washington state area, and I see them come across daily email notifications in this industry of jobs out there for other competing farms, retail outlets, things like that. And so there's a lot of people that use it as their way to get people to come in.
That's great. That's a good tip for our listeners. Do y'all have any other kind of some closing remarks and thoughts about this topic?
I would just say stay on top of it, keep up with how many people you have, how much you want to play, the benefits, keep your postings up to date, and be willing to think outside the box with experience, and don't get stuck on hiring people that know cannabis. Like, They can all be taught the job. You just need to find quality people to come do the job. And it's not always the case when they say they have cannabis experience.
Yeah. My closing remarks, I think, to speak to our point earlier about the issues with ghosting and stuff with the younger generation, I think what's really key is keeping the lines of communication open, and really like tuning into your own communication style and matching that with the person as well. So that if they are maybe a potential risk for ghosting, that you kind of stay ahead of those things and stay on the process. And if they fall off at a certain step in the process, then you know that they aren't interested or whatnot, right? Like kind of have like a vetting process and keep that communication and that follow-up, whether you do it through automation or whether you have somebody that's on top of that. I think keeping that lines of communication open, because people are putting job, applications everywhere. And so if it's kind of like dating, right? Like they're talking to too many people, then, if you fall off their radar, they might just ghost you because they don't have time to respond or whatnot. So it's just kind of keeping the lines of communication open and having a process in place to vet out people and just really staying on top of that. So I think that if you don't want people to ghost you, don't ghost people either. I think it goes both ways.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Have you all done this, or do you think we need to start sending, like a reminder the day before? Are we still on for the interview tomorrow? Has anybody done that?
Extra information.
We're gonna have to be holding
have.
hands that way.
We have, our hiring managers here do a pretty good job of staying on top of that and sending out reminders. And if you are using the Indeed platform for that, it also sends out an automated reminder as well.
Yeah, I think it's just the reality of it. There's so much choices for employment right now. People will apply for jobs and then get another job after they've applied and accepted an interview. And then it's easier to just go to the job that they took instead of responding to the other person. And you just have to accept that for what it is.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been really interesting. I mean, it's sort of a combination of what it's like to try to find somebody in the cannabis industry and what it's like to work with the younger generation Z, I guess, mostly at this point, some millennials. So anyway, I know it's kind of difficult for some of us to understand or how ghosting could ever be acceptable in any situation. But, as y'all said, I guess we just have to accept it and adapt to it and do the best we can to make sure that our organizations are staffed with the best people who are going to be as loyal as possible and really do the job that's asked of them. So
Exactly.
maybe as these kids grow up, they'll get better. Yes, all fingers crossed. All right, well, go ahead.
I have a feeling in time we'll look back at this and it'll be like, man, why is it different today? So it's how time works, right? It changes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, like my grandmother would say, the only thing certain is nothing will stay the same.
Exactly.
That is the truth.
Exactly. Nice.
All right, y'all, thank you so much for joining us. This has been very enlightening, and I hope it's helpful to people advising their clients or their buddies on how to hire in this industry and in this point in time as well. Not just the generation, but it is interesting, the post-pandemic and all the upending of traditional work life. And so anyway, I'm sure that we will touch base on this in a year or two and see how it's going. So thanks very much, guys.
All right, thank you.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good one.